Welcome to Inside Sim Racing. I'm Sean Cole, and today I'm going to do one of my favorite things to do on the show, and that's anything related to a DIY project or a modification, because that means I'm working on my equipment, working on my rig. And today, to add to my pleasure, I am doing something that we've wanted to test for a very long time on the show, and that is the AP Electrix load cell modification for the G25 or G27 pedals. And we've had so many requests in both the forum and emails for this particular modification, and it is due to that popularity that it's taken a while to get it here. But I have to thank Andy Pastor of AP Electrix. That's Trix, T-R-I-X, apelectrix.com if you want to check them out. And I got to thank Andy Pastor for getting this to us. And they do have a very thorough installation manual at their website. I have it here on my laptop. But I'm just going to follow along and show you how hard or easy it is to install this into a Logitech set of pedals. So we're going to need a few tools to get this done: a 2.5 and a 5mm Allen wrench. You're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver, a 10mm open end or box wrench, and you might need a pair of needle nose pliers, so you might as well get them handy. So it all begins with removing the pedal faces from the Logitech pedals, and that's all 3 pedals. So we're going to go ahead and do that. That's using the 2.5mm Allen wrench, and there's no real science to this. I'm going to go ahead and lay things out nicely so that when I go to put it back together again, it's that much easier. So we've got gas, brake, and clutch. Next is to remove the 14 Phillips screws from the bottom. Now, I've done this a lot of times if you've watched on the show various different mods, and I'm going to do something that I would never advise you to do, and that is use an electric screwdriver. I have it at the lowest torque setting so I can hopefully do as little damage as possible, and like I said, this is made of plastic. The screws go into little plastic inserts or holes, and if you over tighten them more than loosen them, you can do some damage. So when we talk about the 14 screws, by the way, you can identify them a few ways. Number 1 is they're silver and they're smaller. There is also 4 black, larger Phillips head screws for the pedals that run through the middle. Do not remove those right now. So let's just go ahead and start up at the top. Now I am going to go ahead and use a regular Phillips head to remove the remaining screws. And that should conclude all of the silver screws, and again, 14 total. So there we go with that. Let's go ahead and just knock that over real quick. And that gave me the 6 that I was missing. So 8 plus 6 is 14 screws. We'll put them over to the side. Next step is to remove the carpet grip. Well, not to forget the 2 under the carpet gripper, which we did. Now, carefully lift the top from the unit. So let's go ahead and go back down and carefully remove the top from the unit. And there you go. I had to give a little pressure here, but it just came and popped right loose. And one thing you want to be careful about, right at this moment, I already have wires that are attached to the inside top of the cover and to the bottom. So you don't want to just yank this thing off and throw it. Let's go ahead and look again. Now, in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look in here, put it on its side, and if you just take your time, what you'll notice is there are little hooks to hold the wiring. And those hooks are basically holding it in place and keeping these 2 things sort of attached or nicely strung. The other thing you can do is there are 2 screws on the inside here. This is not in the instructions, but if you want a little freedom, you can just remove this wiring entirely from the top. And that way we can put the top out of our way while we work on the rest of the gear. Not essential. If you want to just kind of access the pedal you need and skip this part, you definitely can do that. In my case, whoops. But in my case, I like to have a nice working environment, so that means get it cleaned up as much as possible. So, next thing they want us to do is remove the connections to the potentiometer. That can be difficult. Slide off a pair of needle nose pliers. So I'm going to recommend you do this with needle nose pliers. And the reason why is if you grab onto these little tabs and slip off and pull the wire and pull it, then you're going to be doing a whole soldering project, and we don't want to do that. Another thing I'm going to mention right now, when you're doing projects, if you're not having the luxury of videotaping yourself at home, then one thing you see us do it from time to time on the show, and I'm going to do it right now. And that is, when you get to an important project moment, don't be shy to take a picture. So right now, my concern is the ordering of the wires. I don't know what's going to come later, but before I start pulling wires, I'm just going to get in here with my phone and take a picture, and that picture is showing me the wiring pattern that I'm about to undo. You can draw a map with a pen if you want. That just seems a little faster to me. In this case, it's black wire on top, which I kind of made a mess of there pulling off. White wire in the middle, and red on the bottom. And there you go. I have now released the brake wire. There's no reason to take everything apart right now, by the way. We're only working on the brake pedal, so let's only remove the brake pedal wiring. Next step, remove the ground wire. Now, it's kind of, you're going at an angle, and that can be a little tricky. So I'm actually going to show you a trick that I've learned from my experience with removing brake pedals in particular, and that actually takes us to our next step. Now, the way I'm going to do this, you have to be a little careful. There are 4 black bolts per pedal. So the middle 4 bolts are actually the brake pedal itself. And what I'm going to do is remove these, and you can see they're different than the silver ones, and there are 4. And I'm going to remove them all from the brake pedal only. Now keep in mind, I still have wiring attached. I have that one little black ground wire still attached to the pedal. So what I don't want to do is just let go of the pedal. I want to make sure to keep it close to its original position. And we are going to be removing it. That's why I'm okay removing these screws. So I've removed those 4 and put this back down. And now what I have done is freed up the brake pedal, just like that. And now that makes it very easy to access this ground wire, which I'm now going to remove from the pedal. Bam. So now we have the ground wire removed, all the wiring from that pedal removed, and we have isolated the brake pedal. Next thing we're actually going to do is remove the lower attaching point for the pedal piston, which, if you've seen other mods we've done on the show, we know this is sort of a faux piston. So we're going to need our 5mm Allen and our 10mm box wrench, and we can loosen this one. Pretty straightforward. And there we go. So we're going to go ahead and save that nut and bolt. All that came out was a nut and bolt. Now they want us to remove the upper screws. This is a tricky area if you've ever done this with Logitech. Inside of this, we have 2 Allens on each side. Inside is a threaded rod or tube that both go in. Sometimes you find you start loosening one of these and the rod spins. And there are a couple of tricks. We'll see if we run into that problem. We're pretty good here at seams. We're not going to have that problem today. Sometimes you can put a little sideways angle on it or kind of pinch it this way, and that'll help. And maybe we'll run into that problem when we go to reinstall, so we'll see. Anyway, at this point, that piston is free, and they want us to save the brass piece. So they have us removing this. You can take a picture, remember, or use these to size it up, the upper side. So here's the little brass insert that I was talking about, and you can see maybe that it's threaded inside. So we're going to put that aside. Put the downside nut aside and move along. We're now ready to install the other one. So we really don't have to take a look, but just for the fun of it, let's see what's inside of our ancient set. Ooh, I could have guessed. This is a Nixum modded set. So this is already a modified set of pedals, and we are remodifying them, but we're going to put that aside. We don't need it. I will label that as a Nixum for the future. And now we're going to take the load cell itself. It has a rubber band on mine. Everything else is still in place. And we're going to go from there. Slide the large bolt through the bottom. So we're going to use the same bolt that we used to mount it before. And you can see that I'm putting this in the bottom, so the circuit board is facing outward and going into the bottom. And just like that, we can go ahead and tighten this one down, it looks like. That's our 5mm and our box wrench. Bam, just like that, okay? Then we're gonna put the brass tube into the top of this one. Obviously it was made to replace the Logitech. And we are gonna just put it into the top collar now. So as you can see, this is as straightforward as it gets. We had to look out for some wiring, but for the most part, this has just been replace this part with this part and you're done. My favorite kind of mod, I suppose. And do the same thing over here. And am I gonna have that problem I was warning us about? Nope, this feels like it went in pretty well. Tighten that down. Tighten that down. I'm just gonna make sure I snug this all the way. I'm pretty sure I did, but yep. And look at that. So you can see we have now installed our thing. Potentiometer is still here. It really doesn't matter. There's a little gear mechanism in here. That's not gonna matter, affect anything either. So, and wow, you can feel when it hits this rubber, it's really bottoming out on that. Very interesting. We'll see how it feels to the foot pretty soon. So I think we're gonna start putting this thing back in now. Looks like it. Let's go ahead and go back to here. Back like that. Fits right into its groove. There's really no mystery to where this thing goes. It actually locks into place. You can see if you want to get really perfect about it. There's a little plastic square spot here that actually interlocks with that position on the brake pedal. So now we're going to put these back in. I am going to remind you, if you are going to use a power drill like I am, be very careful. There we go, that's back in. They want me to rewire this one. Red wire, we have a red, a black, and a white. The red wire goes to plus V, which is this one over here. Wiggle that on, bam, make sure it's all the way down. I tried to not press on the wires, by the way, when I did that. I was pressing on the housing itself. White wire goes to signal, which our two choices are out and ground. I'm pretty sure out is signal, but we could actually be real smart here and go to the third one, black wire to ground. So, process of elimination, we confirmed that the white one does belong on the out, or signal equals out. There are two different configurations depending on how you're gonna do it. For standard PC use, you're gonna wire it one way, like I just mentioned. In this case, I'm gonna use the Bodner controller because I actually wanna use my Thrustmaster wheel. So I'm gonna use these with the Bodner controller, which is gonna allow these to be standalone and increase the resolution so that they're actually even higher quality pedals. So I'm gonna use that configuration, which means the black wire goes to V plus. I'm gonna use my needle nose here to do this really well. And then white does go to signal anyway. It's just kind of crisscrossing the red and the white. I'm not sure why you have to do that. That's kind of disturbing to me. I would like there not be, because should I really want to do this multiple ways? Bam. and then the red wire goes to ground. Okay, next step is putting these back together. That's pretty much it. Thinking backward of how this came apart, we have a couple things to deal with. Number one, first and foremost, is putting this cord back in. If you remove the top like I did, which I'm glad I did, knowing that I was going to remove this pedal, I can think of a way to save a step, but I'm not sure I'd advise everybody. It's just because I've kind of torn into these a lot. So what I'm going to do, the solid portion of the wire is going to face outward, obviously. And I'm going to try to get this thing back in place. There's that little rubber anchor which slides in between these two posts when things go well. And then these screws hold them down. This goes way down here, like that. Then these go in, and then it's a matter of routing this wire properly. And then like that. And this wire flips around like that. We're gonna have to do that on our final pinch. Now, here's the tricky part. You do not want to pinch these wires. There are guides on the inside of this that you can attach the wiring to. It's kind of hard to see in there. I'm doing it by feel. If I looked at the cover, there are little teeny spots along a ridge where this wiring all can just kind of be guided along. We can put it back together again. Boom. And you kind of cross your fingers that you didn't pinch anything. You want to kind of hold it, because if I set it down, it's just going to pop it loose. And I'm actually going to start with the deeper screws that I had to do by hand. That is number 14. Now we're going to flip it over and then start installing our pedals. I'm going to go ahead and start with the gas pedal using our 2.5mm Allen wrench. Not a lot of science to this part either. So there you have it. We just need to hook this up to our Bodner cable and plug it into the PC, get it to recognize our new pedal, and I'm dying to try it out and see how it actually works. So I'm going to go ahead and take a little time out here. I'm going to get it installed into my R seat, get my Thrustmaster set up, and see how this really plays in the game. When I come back, I'll have the pros, cons, and give it a final score.
Take your hobby to the next level with a quality racing rig that works great with a PS3, Xbox 360, and a PC. GT Omega Racing Simulator is compatible with a wide range of steering wheels, including Logitech, Fanatic, Thrustmaster, and more. The GT Omega is available now worldwide by going to www.gtomegaracing.com.
Welcome back to the show and my review of the AP Electrix load cell mod for the Logitech G27 pedals. And when it comes to setting up these pedals, you have a couple different options, and you might wonder why. The first option are for those of you who are going to continue using a Logitech wheel and you want to plug the pedals directly into it. You'll have one set of directions for doing it that way. The other option is for those of you who might want to use the Leo Bodner cable, which allows you to use the pedals as a standalone. And that does more than just make them a standalone pedal, actually. It increases the resolution of the pedals. So not only do you have more accuracy, but it also allows you to use a different wheel. So in my case, I'm using my T500 wheel, with the Logitech pedals and with that Leo Bodner cable, I can go ahead and do that. So looking back to option 1, basically you're gonna put this in, you're gonna follow the instructions just like I did on the thing, and you're gonna plug it right into your wheel and go right into calibration. And other than the feeling of the pedal itself, you're not gonna notice any difference. Now the Leo Bodner cable is actually sold separately, so you can go to leobodner.com, and I think they run about 35 bucks, but you would have to buy that separately. And in my installation, that's the way I set it up. So now I'm really looking more at the PC specific setup. So when it comes to calibration, you're gonna pull up your controller options. You have your standard properties just like everything was before. Go ahead and calibrate the device. And regardless of whether you have them plugged into the wheel or whether you have them plugged in separately, I'm gonna give you a little tip on calibration, especially when it comes to the brake pedal. When you go into the calibration mode, you are setting the distance, the range of motion at that moment in time. So if you're in Windows screen, that calibration, or if you're in iRacing calibrating your pedals, you are actually telling the game right then the total range of movement. My recommendation to most people out there, regardless of your pedal set really is, leave a little on the table. If you press as hard as you can, then you're gonna have to press that hard every time you go to brake if you want 100% pressure. If you leave it just a little bit shy of full pressure, it makes it easier to get to that full braking without having to flex your entire rig to have the confidence that you've obtained full pressure. Now on the flip side, if you want to just barely touch on it, you can make this very, very sensitive. So the amount that you press on the pedal during calibration is going to affect how sensitive the pedal is. For me, I usually press to what I perceive as being 95% pressure, and that should be pretty good for me to duplicate anytime I want. Now in iRacing, we have one more adjustment that I want you to focus on, and that is for the brake force curve factor. And what that is basically a linearity setting. So if you are using a standard potentiometer, you can actually make it more sensitive in the first half of travel versus the second half of travel. Now in the case of a load cell, it's kind of created its own linearity. That's sort of the whole point behind a load cell. So you're going to want to put that brake force curve factor down to 0. Now when driving the AP Electrix load cell mod, the first thing you're going to notice, and it's so overwhelming if you've been using those springs, is the difference in the brake feel. I mean, when I first pressed it, it moved so smoothly that I thought something was actually broken. It wasn't even working. But sure enough, I was getting braking in the game. What you're gonna notice is some very smooth, light travel that is gonna increase. When you start getting further and further, it gets tighter and tighter, harder, more pressure, and it's all in very little movement. We're talking about only about 1.5 inches of travel to get full braking pressure. Within just a couple of laps, my brain and foot had adjusted to this new brake pedal. Under heavy braking, it was easy to hit the brake hard and give it just a touch more or less pressure to prevent wheel lockup. I also found it very easy to lighten up on the brakes for some trail braking into the corners. Now let's talk about the pros and cons of the AP Electrix load cell mod. The first one being, it's very affordable. At 70 bucks, it is much, much less than all the other load cells that I've tested. Another pro is that it's easy to install. The installation is pretty simple and can be done by most people with very simple tools. Another pro is the added stiffness and realism. This is much stiffer than the stock pedals and feels much more like a real car pedal. Another pro is the accuracy. We've talked about it over and over here on the show. Pressure is much easier to judge or remember or duplicate than distance. Another pro is better braking. Forget everything else. I'm getting less wheel lock and braking in shorter distances. Another pro is that it still is G25 and G27 compatible. Not only is it simple, but everything still fits in the same cover and works like normal. So now let's move on to the cons. And I don't have a lot of cons. In fact, the only thing I can really say in a negative way about the load cell is the fact that you've voided your warranty as soon as you open these up and change things out. But it's a pretty proven wheel and pedal set, so I'm not that worried about that one. So as you can see, the pros heavily outweigh the cons. So when I consider that and I put it on the rev scale, I'm going to give the AP Electrix load cell mod for the G25, G27 pedals a 10 out of 10. I mean, what else can I really say? Take out your Logitech pedals, put this in it, and gain time on the track. I found that I was getting my braking done earlier. I was running over apexes because I was getting my braking done so early. I had less wheel lockup, better tire wear, and much more realism than compared to the stock pedal. Now, it's not as glamorous as, say, a Canon pedal set, but it's also coming in at about 1/10 of the cost. However, when I have to consider the time and confidence gained out on track, I have to think of this as the best bang for the buck in all of sim racing. So I hope you've enjoyed my take on the AP Electrix load cell mod for the Logitech pedals. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.